Welcome to Grazora Live, where we help small business owners move from that feeling of being stuck in the business where it's owning you, taking all of your time, stealing your life away from you, and help you convert that into a machine that's going to propel you towards your dreams and destiny. Brett, what are we talking about today?
Well, with that introduction, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the first principles of business, or first principles of formula, and it applies to life and business.
Okay.
And I've got it broken down into 5 F's that each one has the two C's.
Wow.
And
We're talking about 15 things then, huh?
uh, yes, that would make sense. 15.
2 minutes per each and go.
All right, and go. Okay. So the first one is the frame that you approach things with. And another way to think of a frame is a mindset or your beliefs about it.
Okay.
And so in order to have a frame, a functioning frame that can move you to where you want to be, you need to have clarity and confidence. So you need to know what you're moving towards, and you need to have the confidence that you can actually do it. And And when we talk about a belief system, a lot of it comes down to, if you don't even believe something is possible, then you're not even going to look for solutions to solve it. So you're like, there's no way that I can grow my business to $1 million. If that's your belief, then you're never going to look for the solution on how you can actually break through $1 million. Like it just won't happen. And
I
so,
remember several years ago that you and I were having a conversation and you were trying to tell me that I was a lot closer than I thought I was. And I didn't believe it. I was like, there's no way. It can't be. It's not going to happen. I was sitting at your kitchen table as we're talking, and you're like, no, you're actually really close. I'm like, nope, nope, nope. And it was my belief that held me back from moving to that next level. So totally see what you're talking about there.
yeah, and as this book we're working on gets closer and closer to um, publish date, that is one of the key things that I'm trying to have baked into every single chapter is, what beliefs are we breaking for our readers? How are we going to help them realign to where they have a frame that actually will carry them forward, instead of these limiting beliefs, these false beliefs, and um, so that they can have the confidence and actually look for the solutions that matter. So yeah, and thanks for sharing that story. Next, we have facts, and so when it comes down to it, you might hear one of your customers say, "Oh, I just need more sales." When you ask, "Well, how do you get sales?" Well, I get sales through referrals. Okay, so your existing customers give you referrals. So how many referrals have you asked for this week? Uh, and so if you don't have the facts, if you don't have the numbers, you don't take the time to put them together, then none of it matters. Like you'll be stuck and not be able to move forward. And so the very first thing you need, the first C, is curiosity. You have to approach things with curiosity, whether that's with yourself or your own actions or somebody else. It's just like, okay, like here's what you say. Well, show me the facts. What's related to that? And give me the actual data so we can get out of our gut. Because as you talk to your teams, if you don't if you don't bring the facts into it, they'll just tell you how they feel, and feelings don't move us forward.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I think a good analogy I've seen on that is, or maybe not analogy. I'll get to the analogy in a second, but it's going back to that theory of constraints. We usually have one bottleneck that's really holding us back from the next breakthrough. But if all we're going off from is our feeling of frustration, then we're probably going to have our bodies tell us, well, whenever you feel frustrated, you go and watch TV and eat chips. So the best way to solve this problem in your business is to go and watch TV and eat chips. Then you won't feel bad anymore. And you're like, oh, I fixed it. You go and sit down, you get up the next day and you're like, oh, the problem's still here. Oh, I know. Go watch TV and eat chips. But if you have the facts that say, no, that making yourself feel better doesn't solve the problem. Here's the actual problem, then you can attack it, right?
Right, right. And so along with having that curiosity, you need to have certainty that the facts that you're actually using are the actual facts. Like that you're looking at real data and again, not just feelings, not just somebody's opinion, not a spreadsheet that somebody put together 3 years ago about how your customers are segmented. You want modern, up to date, accurate information to work with. And so once you have that, then you can actually get into the real fundamentals. And the fundamentals is like what's true about your business? What are the truths that your business is founded on that actually makes it work? Um, Along with what are the things that you have to have as part of your business in order for things not to fall apart. So, for example, in any business, as much as most business owners hate it, you got to have bookkeeping and accounting. If you don't, you're going to get yourself in trouble from a cash flow standpoint. You're going to get yourself in trouble from a tax standpoint, payroll issues. I mean, there's no end of issues that can come from not having that piece. And so there might be a number of fundamentals, but at its core, the first C is your core. So how does your business work? What what are the levers you have to pull to get revenue to come in and be profitable? And and then the components, how does each of those parts connect to the next one? What is a series of events that happens in that? And so you need to identify that. You write it down. Um, and um, the challenge of having to go from something nebulous where you think you know how your business works to forcing yourself to put it into writing will bring huge amounts of clarity. And it's hard, which is why like you could get to this step if you're taking notes as you should be, and get to the step and you're like, oh, I'm I'm just going to skip it and move on to the next one. But if you do, you're missing out on the fundamental thing that makes this work, because you need to know what your assumptions are about how your business works. Otherwise, the next step, which is the flip, doesn't work, because when you get to the flip, that's when you use your creativity to challenge all your assumptions about how things actually work. And then you already mentioned theory of constraints, or the constraints of the business, but that's where in the flip you also apply constraints. And one of the most important questions that you can ask is, how do I achieve X result without Y resources or Y whatever? So, how do I get more sales without hiring a salesperson? How do I how do I increase my revenue without having to get more customers? How do I and when you frame questions in this, how do I do X without Y, you force yourself to be creative and come up with solutions that can actually move things forward.
And I think that's a really important note to make, that the creativity usually means that we're going to be doing things a little bit or a lot of bit different. And we have to not be so married to what we have been doing all along that we're not willing to change. I knew a guy who his business was getting absolutely eaten and decimated by the internet. And for years, he had been the foremost expert in this field, and he still could have been if he'd been willing to embrace the changes that the internet were bringing about. But because he wanted to do everything this way, that we've always done it my way, as he'd say, nobody else was even around for him to bring in his customers. But it would have taken a little, like you're saying, creativity of, okay, this is where I'm at. How do I change that? But he wasn't willing to make that happen. So he kept chugging down those tracks and heading for worse and worse failure because of that inability to change.
Yeah. And so that is another that is a big thing. And going back to the previous fundamentals, um, I have a new neighbor just down the street. Come to find out, he started a business about a year and a half ago, and the way he set up his employees was completely wrong.
Oh,
And now he has huge issues because he didn't have his fundamentals correct. He didn't have the right frame to know that he could have talked to an expert about how to set things up. He just did it without making sure, without checking with anybody, because his frame was like, I don't know, and does it really matter?
Ooh.
And he had a frame that didn't function for him, and so now he is stuck with a massive mess, um, on that side of things, where from a tax liability standpoint, from a um, whatever government agencies are will come after him for it, for the jurisdiction that he's in, and uh, and it's an issue. And now he's forced to confront that. And so one of the big things about the flip is it lets you confront these issues before they're actually punching you in the face.
Mm.
And so so when you have the facts and you know what you think your fundamentals are, and then you begin to challenge your assumptions and ask that question, how do I achieve X without Y? It gives you an opportunity to look at things, um, again, before you get punched in the face, when then by then it's almost too late to really do anything about it in some cases. And then you've got to pick yourself up on the ground and almost start from scratch in some cases.
Right. Absolutely.
So, but if you can get through those first 4 steps, you can get to the 5th F, which is freedom.
Mhm.
And freedom has 2 components. It has courage and commitments. So when you get there, you've got to have the courage to make the change, to make the decisions that are actually going to move things forward. And you've got to have the commitment. You've actually got to keep the commitment and do what you say you're going to do. And to go back to frame with the clarity and the confidence is something that you build by keeping the commitments you make to yourself in private. So if you don't have clarity and confidence, then you're stuck. You can't get beyond that. But when you have clarity and confidence, then you get the facts with curiosity and certainty. You know what your fundamentals are, what the core are, and how everything connects together. You you flip it, you use creativity, you challenge assumptions, and ask the question, how do you get X result without Y resource? And then you have the courage to actually move forward with what this exercise tells you and keep the commitment that you make instead of flipping and trying something new in 2 or 3 weeks. Like stick with the commitments you make. It will it will over time transform your business and allow you to scale and move beyond. So for example, I know from personal experience and from working with lots of business owners that the thing that keeps most of them stuck is really their fundamental mindset about they have to be the ones to do the work. That if they're not involved in every piece, not necessarily directly, but by micromanaging the individuals involved, then their business will fall apart. And when you have that frame, when that's the belief that you approach things with, you're never going to look for the solutions for, well, how can you truly build a business that can run without you?
Right.
As
Because I
as I
wanna
said at the
call out,
beginning.
if I could real quick, when you're in that mindset, you've probably built a business that will reinforce your belief, but that doesn't mean that that's a universal truth. It just means you built the framework, you built the house, and it all relies on you, but that's not the only way to build. So, deleting that belief is the first step to rebuilding from everything relies on you to not.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a good point because um, we absolutely put structures around us that reinforce our own beliefs. And unless you're really and often it takes being punched in the face before we're willing to look at the things we put around ourselves and say, "Hey, this isn't quite right. This isn't working the way I thought." And so the invitation here is to go through this exercise before you get punched in the face and reevaluate. um, from first principles how things are going. And you can do this anytime, but we're still early enough in the beginning of the year. I mean, you could consider that this could even be part of your New Year's resolution. You're really going to figure out how your business functions and how you can grow it. And it's an exercise to go through on a regular basis because over time the market changes, the business shifts, your goals and intentions shift, what you want, all of that can change. And so bringing clarity and challenging where you're at can really give you a big boost. And so when we talk about this, there is we'll call it a bad way to run your business, and there's a great way to run your business. The bad way is if you imagine that you're just as you solve problems, it's like stacking sand. You're trying to build a big business, but you're stacking grains of sand. You solve problems, and if you've ever played in sand, you know that the pile can only get so high before the sand starts rolling back down.
Mhm. Yeah, the foundation has to get huge before it gets very
Absolutely
tall.
huge, and
Yep.
and and even then, you're still not very tall. I think that and, for anyone who cares, the term for that is angle of repose, and so different materials have a different angle of repose, which is how high they can stack before the top starts rolling off.
I was thinking more of concrete and slump
Oh, but, so if you
coming
wanna
from
build
my
it
world.
great. Yeah. So the great way to build your business is to do it with these first principles and treat it more like blocks that you can actually stack. Instead of solving something, putting a fire out, and then having it flare up again in 2 or 3 weeks later, you put systems in place. You put, um, you have SOPs, you have metrics that you track, you have regular trainings, you have a structure and order to how things go, so that then you can begin stacking blocks. And anybody who's ever played with blocks knows that you can stack blocks a whole lot faster and quicker than you can stack grains of sand and get a much, much taller tower or a much, much better business. And
Yeah.
then
You know, I've built sandcastles before, and we used to go down to the beach, and it'd be me and a bunch of cousins, uncles, and aunts, and we'd all get together, and a bunch of us would go down, and we'd take those shovels, and we'd start stacking, and we'd pack the sand, and we'd dump water on it, and pack and dump water, trying to get it solid enough that we could then carve it out into some kind of a structure. But I can tell you that took forever, and it has no structural integrity. All it takes is the littlest wave of water, and it washes away. Whereas I've built block structures up to the ceiling that were no more than a foot wide at the base. But if I built, or 18 inches wide at the base, rather, and I could build something that could stand up to a lot of force and would be resilient because I built with blocks instead of sand.
especially if you really screw those blocks together and or use, or glue them together to where those connections between those different blocks are really solid.
Yeah,
And then it's not coming apart unless it's the most extreme forces,
right. Absolutely.
which you can protect your business from those. So it's not pulling itself apart from within. And so that's a analogy we use to think about how building from first principles and building with systems helps you get where you want to go a whole lot faster than building with sand.
And for anybody who may have just jumped in and missed that sand analogy, what does it mean when they're building with sand?
It means it means you're just putting out fires and not installing a system to keep that fire from happening again. All the friction points in your business create fires on a regular basis. And if you don't put a system in place to keep it oiled, to make sure it runs smoothly, or to get whatever is in the way out, then you're just going to have a constant um, set of fires that are always cropping up, and you'll be working harder and harder and harder and not getting any further ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and so, for anyone who cares, to get a little homework would be identify one issue in your business, go through the 5 Fs, and then when you finish it, come up with 3 changes that you're actually going to implement to solve that problem. And if you can just go through that simple exercise once a week, once a month, it will transform your business over time, block by block.
I love it. So recap for everybody the 5 F's one more time. I think that would be helpful at this point because we've covered a lot
Yeah.
of territory.
So your frame, which is like your beliefs, your mindset around a thing, the facts, the actual numbers and data, the fundamentals, what do you believe about how it actually works? The flip, challenge those assumptions about how it actually works, and ask yourself the question, how can I get X result without Y resource? You impose a constraint upon yourself. And that is one of the most powerful questions that you can ask in business is how do you achieve X without Y? Because it can really, really narrow down the discussion and help you think more creatively. And then get you to freedom where you actually make the decisions and stick with them um, to see the result of your efforts.
I love it.
Oh, um, anything else?
You know, I was just thinking about that and how you've got the frame and the facts. And I've seen people who are so sure that their frame is reality that they will flat out ignore any facts that don't align with their perception of reality. And when you confront them on it, sometimes they'll get all out and out like hostile towards you and start blaming you for causing inconveniences to them, but in reality you're just pointing out that reality doesn't match the map in their brain. And I think that the more that people are open and willing to believe that maybe their perception up here doesn't equal the total truth of reality, that's one of the most freeing moments because it's the moment we go from being calcified and stuck to flexible and adaptable to change.
Right, right. One of my coaches put it this way that we have our story and then you have the physics or what a lot of people would call reality, but we use the term physics specifically. And so we have our stories and we have the physics of how things actually are, and we get so stuck in our story. And stories, I mean, there's a place for stories. Like we need those frames, but that's all they are. They're a frame, they're a perception.
Yeah.
And when we can get out of our story and out of the physics, we get into a realm of possibility where we can truly be creative, where we can create, um, and we can define a new story or alter the story or do anything we need to so that we can create and build a life that actually serves us, a life that we want to live, that we're excited about, something that when, whether you use an alarm or not, when you wake up in the morning, you're excited to get out of bed because you've got something that you're looking forward to, something that you actually want to achieve. And um, and so if you're not that way, then the invitation is to look at your story and realize what it is, that it is just a story, something that you're telling yourself, um, which again goes back to which ties in so tightly with what we talked about a couple weeks ago with threats and how when we perceive a threat, there's an automatic response that our bodies create. But in our modern world, very, very few threats are actually life threatening,
Mhm.
but our body creates a response as though they are. And so if we can shift our story very, very quickly, we can avoid extreme reactions. We can avoid sending ourselves down those paths and keep ourselves in a mindset where we can create, where there's possibility. And that's where frame, story, perception, those are all pretty much synonyms for the same thing.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, I love that. It's something that I think not enough people consciously realize, but when you see that light bulb moment for someone, it's pretty transformational. There's still a ton of work though, because
Yeah.
the analogy we were talking about earlier, we still have to shift from building with sand to now building a structure which is a whole new set of skills that oftentimes a business owner doesn't have right away, and it takes them time and effort and trial and error to acquire those skills. But it is that it's that first step onto a new path, and that fork is always available on someone's path. There's never a point where they've gone so far they can't shift and start walking down that new path. It's just that recognition that that ability is always there.
Yeah, and I remember, and I wish I could remember how the guy worded it, but I was talking to a gentleman several years ago. He's actually a professional bodybuilder.
Mm,
So big guy. He's taller than I am, so he's like 6'5" and just absolutely huge. Um, anyway, he was going back to school to get another degree, and he's in his 40s, and I'm like, what? Like, why would you do that? And like, it's just going to take so long. And so and he's like, well, I'm gonna live the life, like, the time is gonna pass regardless. Like, whether I'm doing that or whether I'm doing something else, the time is gonna pass. So saying that the time that it takes to achieve something even, like, is a factor, it doesn't even matter because either way, that time is going to pass. The only question is, what am I doing with it?
mm,
And he had it worded really, really well, to where it just kind of impacted me to where I realized, like, yeah, like, anytime I wanna pivot, anytime I wanna add something, it doesn't matter how long it takes. Like it took me 10 years to build that business. What else are you gonna do?
yeah,
And that is the real question. Is like, what else are you gonna be doing with that time? You gonna work your dead end 9 to 5 job for making just over minimum wage? Is that where you want to be for the next 10 years? Or do you want to actually like try, and even if you don't really succeed the way you hope, I mean, which story would you rather tell yourself 10 years from now? That you worked, that you tried, you struggled, and you made it, or not, but that you actually tried, or that you fell into the mode that we see so many people in. It's they work their 9 to 5, looking forward to nothing more than their six pack in the ball game on the weekends.
yep, exactly. And I think that the people that are on that journey of building something incredible are happier, and not because they don't have problems, but because they're moving down that path towards their vision.
Yeah, they're creating. And I think that's one of the things that we're here for, is to create. It's in our natures to create. It's God given in our natures, is that creativity. So if we're just being passive, if we're just in maintenance mode, just living life day to day without creating, without building, without making life better for ourselves and others, then it's empty.
Exactly.
So
I think that's a great place to end. So if you're not creating, get started doing it and you'll love your life more. See y'all next
like this
week.